August 17, 1981. Brooklyn, New York. A quiet house on 76th Street in Bensonhurst. Dominick, Sonny Black Napolitano, waits. The acting capo of the Bonanno crime family has been told there is a meeting, a sit-down, routine business. He removes his jewelry, hands it to a friend. "If I don't come back," he says, "you know what happened." Hours later, he is gone. No body, no funeral, no public mourning, just whispers moving through social clubs from Brooklyn to Queens. The official reason spreads quickly. He allowed an undercover FBI agent into the family, but that is only part of the truth. This was not simply punishment for being deceived. It was a calculated execution, a message to every capo, a warning to every soldier, and a desperate act by a crumbling crime empire fighting federal annihilation. The film Donnie Brasco showed the friendship. It showed the betrayal. It did not show the full brutality of what happened to Dominick Napolitano, nor did it explain why his death became inevitable long before the FBI revealed Joseph Pistone's identity. Dominick Napolitano was born on June 16, 1930. Brooklyn raised him. Not the polished borough tourists would later know, but the post-war grid of tenements, butcher shops, church basements, and backroom card games. Bensonhurst in the 1940s was more than a neighborhood. It was a pipeline. Boys learned quickly who held power. It was not the politicians. It was not the police. It was the men who sat in social clubs with the blinds half closed. Napolitano grew up in that shadow. He was not flashy, not theatrical. He did not chase headlines. He understood something more valuable: proximity to power. By his 20s, he was already circling the Bonanno crime family's orbit. Small jobs at first. Errands, collections, driving. In Cosa Nostra, trust is currency, and trust is tested slowly. Napolitano proved reliable, calm under pressure, quiet when necessary, loyal when it counted. He built his reputation inside Brooklyn social clubs, places that looked like harmless storefront lounges but functioned as command posts. Loans were arranged there, disputes were settled there, and occasionally death sentences were whispered there. By the 1960s, he was no longer a peripheral figure. He was a made man. To be made meant something sacred inside La Cosa Nostra, an oath, a burning saint's card, a vow of silence. From that moment forward, betrayal meant death. Napolitano believed in that code. He was not driven by chaos. He was driven by structure, hierarchy, order, and that belief, in loyalty above all else, would ultimately make him vulnerable to the most devastating betrayal of his life. The 1970s fractured the Bonanno crime family. Old leadership weakened, alliances shifted, ambition sharpened. At the center of the storm stood Carmine Galante. Galante had returned from prison with a singular goal: absolute control. He distrusted compromise. He ignored the quiet balance that kept New York's 5 families stable. Napolitano aligned himself with him, not because Galante was reckless, but because Galante rewarded loyalty. Inside the Mafia, proximity to a rising boss meant survival and opportunity. When Galante consolidated power in the mid-1970s, he needed men who would not question orders, men who would enforce collections, supervise bookmakers, keep soldiers disciplined. Napolitano fit that mold. By the late 1970s, he was operating as a powerful capo in Brooklyn, controlling crews, managing rackets, overseeing loan sharking and gambling operations. The hierarchy mattered: boss, underboss, consigliere, capo, soldier, associate. Each level enforced the one above it. Each level feared the one above it. A capo like Napolitano functioned as both shield and sword. He insulated leadership from exposure. He delivered revenue upward. He absorbed risk downward. Then, on July 12, 1979, Galante was assassinated in a Brooklyn restaurant courtyard. Power shifted again. The Bonanno family entered another period of instability. Federal surveillance intensified. Internal distrust grew. In that vacuum, Napolitano's importance increased. He became acting capo of his crew, operating out of the Motion Lounge in Brooklyn, a storefront that looked unremarkable from the street. Inside, decisions were made that shaped criminal enterprises across the borough. Napolitano believed he had navigated the chaos successfully, but instability breeds desperation, and desperation makes even seasoned capos susceptible to one catastrophic mistake. September 1976, a jeweler from Miami appears in New York. His name is Donnie Brasco. In reality, he is FBI agent Joseph D. Pistone. He does not rush. He does not ask for status. He waits. Undercover infiltration of Cosa Nostra was nearly impossible. The Mafia did not recruit strangers. It absorbed them slowly through observation and sponsorship. Brasco understood this. He attached himself first to low-level associates, proved usefulness, showed patience. Eventually, he was introduced to Dominick Napolitano. This was the critical moment. Inside Mafia structure, a capo's word carried weight. If Napolitano vouched for someone, that endorsement traveled upward. Trust became transferable. Brasco was careful. He never overplayed ambition. He displayed competence in small crimes, fencing jewelry, arranging minor deals, sitting quietly in the Motion Lounge without speaking out of turn. Napolitano saw something in him: reliability, respect, obedience, the very traits Napolitano valued in himself. Over time, Brasco became part of the crew's daily rhythm. Meals, meetings, conversations about business. Napolitano began to mentor him. Inside Cosa Nostra, mentorship is not sentimental. It is strategic. A capo invests in men who strengthen his position. By sponsoring Brasco, Napolitano expanded his influence. But Mafia law is absolute. If you bring in a traitor, the betrayal becomes yours. The decision to trust Brasco was not dramatic. It was incremental. Small approvals, small endorsements. Yet each one tightened a noose Napolitano could not see. The infiltration was no longer external. It was seated at his own table. By the late 1970s, the rules of the game were changing. For decades, organized crime had operated in the shadows of American politics. Tolerated, sometimes quietly accommodated, rarely dismantled at the top. That era was ending. In 1970, Congress passed the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. At first, many mob leaders dismissed it as symbolic. They were wrong. By the mid-1970s, federal prosecutors began using RICO not to chase individual crimes, but to target entire hierarchies. Bosses could now be indicted for crimes they never personally committed. The strategy was surgical. Flip one insider. Map the structure. Climb upward. After the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa in 1975, public tolerance for Mafia influence collapsed. Congressional hearings intensified. Media scrutiny sharpened. The image of the untouchable mob boss began to erode. The FBI adapted. Instead of relying solely on informants facing prison, they invested in long-term undercover infiltration. Patient, embedded, strategic. Joseph Pistone's operation was not improvisation. It was institutional evolution. Inside the Bonanno family, leadership instability after Carmine Galante's assassination had already weakened internal cohesion. Now federal pressure magnified every internal suspicion. Trust became dangerous. Association became liability. If a capo unknowingly sponsored a federal agent, the consequences would extend beyond embarrassment. It would signal structural weakness, and weakness, in Mafia logic, invites collapse. By 1981, the Bonanno family was not just protecting rackets. It was fighting for survival against a government finally willing to dismantle it from the inside. In that climate, mercy became impossible. July 1981. The call came quietly. Joseph Pistone was being pulled out. His cover was blown. The FBI had gathered enough. Enough recordings, enough indictments. Inside the Bonanno family, panic did not explode. It spread, slow, controlled, deadly. Meetings were called behind closed doors. Capos summoned, questions asked without being spoken directly. Who brought him in? The answer was unavoidable. Dominick Napolitano had vouched for him, sponsored him, defended him. Under Mafia law, intention does not matter. Outcome does. Napolitano had introduced an FBI agent into the bloodstream of the family. He had allowed surveillance into private conversations, exposed operations, compromised reputations. Even if he was deceived, he was responsible. Privately, some understood the truth. Pistone had been patient, professional, nearly undetectable. But Mafia justice is not based on nuance. It is based on preservation. Leadership could not appear weak. Other families were watching. The commission was watching. If the Bonanno family tolerated such a breach without consequence, it would signal vulnerability, and vulnerability invites takeover. Napolitano began to feel it. Calls slowed. Invitations stopped. Conversations shortened. Isolation inside organized crime is a sentence before the sentence. He was not formally accused, not publicly condemned. He was simply no longer protected. In Cosa Nostra, when protection disappears, the end has already been approved. The Bonanno family never acknowledged what had happened. Dominick Napolitano was gone. No body surfaced, no official funeral. The silence was intentional, a message for those still inside the hierarchy. Disobedience or miscalculated trust is fatal. The immediate impact reshaped the Brooklyn crews. Soldiers were reassigned, loyalty tested, fear intensified. Other capos watched closely. Every interaction with outsiders became cautious. Every introduction scrutinized. For surviving associates, the disappearance became a ghost lesson. Trust cautiously. Speak minimally. Obey hierarchy without question. Federal authorities leveraged the chaos. The removal of Napolitano destabilized the family at a crucial time. Internal fractures widened. Evidence already gathered from Pistone's undercover operation became more valuable. The commission, observing from afar, took note. The Bonanno family's swift, secret execution reinforced old Mafia rules, but revealed new vulnerabilities. Publicly, the family appeared intact. Privately, fear had replaced respect. Operations slowed. Rackets were handled with extra caution. Suspicion poisoned loyalty. Even decades later, the ripple persisted. Future investigations cited the Napolitano case as a turning point. The FBI had concrete proof that embedded infiltration could penetrate the highest levels. Mob historians now agree. The execution and the methodical disappearance marked the decline of the Bonanno family's autonomy. The lesson was clear. In the Mafia, power is maintained by fear, not affection. And the absence of one capo can echo louder than any death notice. August 17, 1981. The day begins and ends the same. Dominick Napolitano walked into a house he trusted. He walked out of history the family wanted erased. His death was more than punishment. It was a signal, a recalibration of power, a demonstration of the uncompromising logic that sustains organized crime. Mafia loyalty is conditional. It is measured not in friendship, but in utility, in influence, in the absence of vulnerability. Napolitano believed in structure, hierarchy, oaths, the sacredness of sponsorship, yet the very system he revered dictated his demise. Small decisions, once insignificant, compounded into inevitability, trust in the wrong person, action under flawed perception, the alignment of law enforcement and political pressure. In the end, the story is circular. The Motion Lounge, the city streets, the quiet Brooklyn nights, unchanged. But the echoes of betrayal persist. Power survives. Loyalty is a transaction. Death is procedural. For historians, law enforcement, and students of human ambition, Napolitano's fate offers a chilling reflection. The line between authority and vulnerability is razor thin. Even the most disciplined men, embedded in systems of order, can fall prey to it. The Mafia teaches a brutal philosophy. To hold power is to accept that those you protect may destroy you. And in that lesson, the streets of Brooklyn whisper still. The Motion Lounge remains quiet, but the memory of August 17th, 1981, haunts every shadow. The end.